Scott's due in about 10 minutes. So very quickly, so my talks are going to be a bit different from the others. Most people are going to talk about current research. I just wanted to give a bit of context about the lab. So there's the lab. So some of the prehistory before BiD per se got started was that there was robotics going on in Soda Hall. Myself and Eric Pilas, and we became very interested in the internet, which was taking off. Imagine that. There was no internet really before '94, but it was taking off then. And we were interested in telepresence and making sort of the internet extend into the physical world. And so we had a series of robots starting in '95 that made their way around Soda Hall, sometimes went outside and then frequently fell over or got stranded. And that lab was 410 Soda, which is currently a hardware lab, but back then it was robotics, and it gradually absorbed some of James Landay's work as well, especially some of the larger projects. And so, and James arrived in '97 and then immediately started up a very energetic HCI group that focused on informal interfaces, also multimodal interfaces, and a series of projects, satin, denim, suede, damask, and this one that's not a fabric, which was Scott's work, Designer's Outpost. Very interesting early sort of multimodal and tangible interface. And also at that time, we formed a group that was an interdisciplinary sort of HCI++ group with more social science, because we were kind of a small group. And we felt like HCI, or at least, human-computer interaction should be a bit broader, and we had all these social scientists on campus. So some set of us, which was similar to the BiD set, started meeting together. We ran seminars for several years. Let's see, around 2000, actually 99 to 2003, and 6 retreats. About half of them local, half of them at Lake Tahoe. And it was pretty interesting. It was sort of a group trying to figure out what its mission really was and what to do. And after some discussions, and especially feedback from outside people from Park, especially Ed Shee and Paul Durish, we decided to focus the effort on design, which also pushed it. It sort of simultaneously drew in a bit more people across campus from the arts, and also a bit more from engineering as well. So, so the identity of the group started changing in time. From about 2002, it was focused on design. It became the BiD Lab, and we identified a need for shared space because it's difficult to bridge both disciplinary and physical distance. So the idea was to have a joint space which we could use for design research. And actually, I don't have slides about this, but we had ambitions of an academic program, and we did run a few pilot classes for a master's in engineering course. Mary Beth Beck and Steve Harrison helped with those. And we also ran a series of short clinics, week-long clinics, on different design topics, so about a dozen or 10 of those. So, but the main effort was research, and lots of things were happening at the time. We thought we might end up in citrus for a while. Citrus was a bit volatile though, so we didn't end up there, but we got this nice space in First Minings right at the time when that building was being remodeled. So, yeah, so the BiD Lab was previously programmed as undergraduate chemistry wet lab. There were basically benches, already fitted out benches and sinks along one wall. And this isn't probably the angle you think it is, by the way. This is looking into the building, and the adjacent space there wasn't finished. I think it was actually open there. But yeah, this was before we built it out. It was still a very nice open airy space, beautiful old building, so really ideal for design. And then by like 2004, we had more or less the current layout. And, you know, locations of food and so on. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly mention the research that I want to get back into, which I'm not currently doing, but moving back towards, and then I'll hand over to Scott. So the theme I've had probably the most involvement in over the last decade is literacy, driven by the literacy gap between the top and bottom quartiles in most developed countries, certainly in the US, and there's a factor of 3, sometimes 4 between the reading competencies and literacies of those kids before they reach school. And the trouble is, once they reach school, that gap just reproduces itself and leads to a really very limited opportunity for the kids coming in with that handicap. There's even a worse situation in developing countries where kids from the poorest part of the population really have almost no access at all to the best schools, typically because there's a colonial language that's the language of instruction in the good schools and universities, which is not spoken realistically in the schools where the poorer children go. So there's a very sharp boundary there, and we worked for several years with MatCam trying to bridge that boundary using games that could run on inexpensive phones, and a little bit more recently through actually interactive agents. This was Anuj Tiwari's work before he graduated, that would engage kids in more real-world question-asking, answering games. And this worked even in a pilot study. It was partly Wizard of Oz and partly automated. And even with a simple game script, we got particularly strong resonance and enjoyment of the character. So very promising work, but to take it further, you really need to step away from carefully scripted content towards real machine learning, real computer vision, real perception, and real reasoning about the world so that you can really actually engage the children in their real environments. So I am doing a lot of work on deep learning and sort of edging back towards this topic. So, okay. So switching back to the mini workshop today, here's our outline. So we're going to go through some fairly short condensed talks from the faculty that have been most heavily engaged and the students who are now faculty, especially from the lab. Then in the afternoon, we'll have a few lightning talks, most of them from 5 to 6, but some people need to squeeze in the schedule, so there'll be a little bit of dynamic adaptation of the schedule as we go through the day. But by and large, this is going to be the schedule. All right, so last thing. I sometimes wonder what my exact role in BiD is, and some of the students from Berkeley Engineering kind of put it in as a label on a shot glass. Probably hard to read, but it says John Kenny, the landlord. So I guess that's what I do. Maybe another way to think about it, though, is that you know, I have a really strong belief in interdisciplinary work. That I dabbled a little bit in that when I was a grad student at MIT, but really didn't go very far. It would be great to have a place like BiD to really get more deeply engaged with students. I would have loved to have that kind of environment. And we continually, you know, try to pull people in from education or high school or social science or whatever. And I think that, you know, is a real key to actually fully developing intellectually. You know, maybe in some sense, it's really the only way to be fully developed is to have a breadth of understanding. And that's been one of the keys to the lab, I think. The other one, of course, is having food and cool prototyping machines. So we probably need to upgrade those a little bit because we have a lot of competition from Jacobs now. But anyway, so I'm going to hand over to Scott now. Let's see, you're on your own laptop? Awesome, okay. And I'm looking forward to connecting with everybody in the course of the day.
This is really fun for me. I was the very first tenant of John's new landlord endeavor. I was the first person to move into Hearst Mining, and he's exactly right about the interdisciplinary piece. It's totally true. So, I'll drive this over here. This. Brilliant. And so what I wanted to talk about today is I think a lot of research creates postcards from the future. You can see here this postcard created about a century ago of what the future might be like. And now this is from the past. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the projects that were going on in the early days and how they influenced the work that I'm doing today. I came to graduate school because I thought that James Landay's dissertation research on sketching user interfaces was remarkable. James had this wonderful idea that you could draw a user interface and then it would actually run. And that led to a number of projects here, including a wonderfully named paper called, for this follow-on system called Denim. As John mentioned, all the papers were fabrics, and so the one that was named after the fabric of jeans was called Finding a Tighter Fit Between Tools and Practice. We have a lot of fun in the lab. And I was really drawn to the fact that we had this really cool opportunity to blend the physical and digital and social worlds. And so I took a lot of the ideas from James's group, and we were looking at, well, could you do something that was collaborative or that was wall scale, that broke off the desktop? I was taking John's seminar at the time, where we were thinking about, this is the early days of ubiquitous computing. And one thing that was fun is Jerry Lanier came by the lab one day. He toured a number of the research groups at MIT, at Stanford, with the iRoom, Terry Winograd's project, and here. And you can see how all these ideas from the research community actually found their way, filtered through Jaron Lanier's mind and a whole lot of other people's, into the Minority Report. There's a bunch of paper, there's a bunch of things in the Minority Report which are just straight out of the Chi proceedings. Like Darrell Bishop's marble answering machine is just the wooden marble there. It's super cool. And a lot of people who worked in these projects. So Ryan Farrell was an undergraduate who did a lot of the vision work with me on the Designer's Outpost. He's now on the faculty at BYU. And which brings me to my next topic, which is that I'm pretty sure that Ryan's website here is a copy of my webpage from about 2008. And so the next project that, if the first project that inspired me to go to graduate school was James's Silk dissertation. One thing that really drew me a lot while I was here is Marty Hurst and Melody Ivory were doing one of the very first data-driven design projects. They had a system where they published a number of papers being able to look at features of websites and being able to offer automated machine learning advice. And I think this was a big break because there was, in the late 90s where Michael Jordan had just arrived, we were very early machine learning at Berkeley, there was not as strong a sense that data-driven stuff was going to be the winner. But if you look at a lot of creative work, so for example, Enceladus, famous photographer, says, there's no rules of composition in photography, just good photographs. And what I think is interesting about this is that he actually wrote a trio of books about the rules of composition and other techniques in photography. And I don't think he's crazy. Rather, I think what he's trying to say is there's lots of rules, but a lot of success is emergent. And so some of the data-driven approaches that Marty pioneered, I think really showed that. And we saw this big switch where in the 90s, the research that we were doing was like swimming in a pool. You build software, bring people into the lab. When they swear, you fix the usability bugs, you release it, and then you have no idea what happens. Whereas in the wild, we can aggregate and manipulate behavior at massive scale. And so Marty's work in part led to a project in my group and Ranjita Kumar's dissertation research on being able to design mind the web. And so many of the same ideas, now it's actually a startup, it's very cool. And so similar to some of Marty's work, what you can do here is that you have the ability we crawl design pages like Google crawls words. And then you can do design searches. And so you can actually do things like, if I use this visual feature here, what are pages that have the nav over here? Well, what do they do over there? Or what are designs that are clean? Or what's hip with restaurants these days? And so this ability to do large-scale search, I think is extremely interesting. I'll talk a bunch about some of the work that we've done thinking about bringing the studio to the globe. And one of the parts of it that I think is most remarkable. We have a system called Peer Studio, where you can hop online and get formative feedback on your work. And so you can submit a piece of work. Because we're doing this in the context of massive online classes, there's somebody else who also just submitted their work. So you can hop on and you can give them feedback about their work. And then after you finish doing that, somebody has reviewed your work, and now you get formative feedback on an essay or something like that. And so if you've ever been in the middle of writing a paper, wondering, does this make any sense? Peer Studio, by virtue of leveraging the global community of learners, gives you a chance to do that. And so here is some real data from an online class where students who were submitted work using Peer Studio received feedback, 87% of them, in less than an hour. And in fact, the people who, in a controlled experiment where we gave people the opportunity for fast feedback or not, students who received rapid feedback on their work actually performed better than those who didn't receive rapid feedback on their work. This idea of design at large is transforming what students are doing in classes also. So my graduate class just had its final presentations yesterday, and there were 2 projects that were on online learning that I'll show you some results from. So, once you start with a new paradigm of something like global scale peer feedback, you get all of these research questions that you want to answer. Like, for example, does it matter who gives you the feedback? Does it matter if you know who's giving you the feedback? And so one interesting result from our group this week is that if people receive feedback from a peer in a class where they are told that the feedback giver is significantly higher performing than they are, they actually think that the feedback is less good and less fair than if the performance between the feedback giver and the receiver is about the same. And you only see this effect when the performance is disclosed, that if you don't know the performance of the feedback giver, you don't feel that way. Going back to James's work with sketching, we've actually been looking at how we can use sketching in massive online classes to communicate conceptual knowledge. If you have novices sketch stuff, they often draw the surface features, so they'll draw something that looks like a volcano. Whereas if you have experts sketch stuff, they'll draw something that works like a volcano. And so just like James's sketches could take drawings and turn them into working systems, if you look at the functional attributes of sketching, that's a wonderful diagnosis of learning. And so what this enables us to do with this turn to design at large is that we have the ability to build practical theory with real-world experiments and then bake that software into something and actually run experiments again and see how those new ideas work. I mean, one of my favorite examples of this is Eric Hollis's props work, which John, that's actually reminds me. So, Eric Hollis's props work was extremely influential because he and John were building these robots that were actually traveling around and were engaged in social activities. Among other things, I taught at Stanford for 9 years, and Eric had one of the props come and give a seminar talk. And so if you're thinking about what does it mean to actually be co-located or to be here, Eric came down and gave a seminar talk where the talk was given by the robot. And this is in a time, I actually pulled this web page last night. It still looks just like this.
Got it.
So,
back one slide.
Okay. So what is presence in the modern age? We had Paul Jacobs and Greg Heinzinger sent a bunch of these Qualcomm phones to the robotics lab. It was the very first integrated telephone and PDA. And so we actually had, it both in the lab and in the broader research community, debates about, will anybody ever want something that is both a cell phone and another device? And so I think that's why I love this William Gibson quote, that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And I mean, BiD really had that attribute for me. It made perfect sense that we would move to the Hearst Mining Building, because when we were in the robotics lab, this was Dan Resnick's dissertation work on the universal planar manipulator. It had these four actuators, two on each side, where it would shake and move objects around. And so you could have a system actuate chess pieces, different ones in different directions. And then we come over to the Hearst Mining Building, where this is also on pins just like that. And this building in an earthquake will basically do the entire thing. You can just look out there, you see these giant rods, and the building is designed to shake a couple of feet.
Well, hopefully the building will not shake while the earth shakes underneath.
That's right, so that's the opposite. The building stays still while the earth shakes. And here where I told some of the folks that were at BiD in the early days that I was going to come and speak this morning. And it's exactly what John said, that it was an extremely multidisciplinary group. So Chris Beckman and I had one cube, and then right next to that was some of Greg Niemeyer's students from art, Alice Agagino and her students from mechanical engineering. It was an extremely multidisciplinary group. And it's something we've tried to reflect in my current venture at the design lab at UC San Diego. And so I'll wrap up. I wanted to say that we're hiring. There are 5 open faculty positions in both for teaching faculty and research faculty in design, HCI, and contextual robotics at UCSD this year. So if you know folks that are interested, please tell them to drop me a line. Thanks. Yes, go ahead.
Any questions for Scott?
We'll see if Eric puts on his hair at that point of the talk.
Yeah, so we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with Manish, getting Manish online. However, it may be better if we just go straight to yours while we sort that out.
Okay.
What? Do you have like can you Skype with Manish?
I think so. I don't even know it.
And you can just stream it. It doesn't matter who you get. Just do that.
I actually don't even know if I have it installed.
I can get another computer.
Well, good morning. So in the next 20 minutes or so, I will try to give you a 60-year retrospective of my own personal involvement with geometry and design. I grew up in Basel, Switzerland, where I attended the Mathematisch-Naturwissenschaftliche Gymnasium. That is a high school with emphasis on mathematics and science. And then during my university years, I heard my mathematics lectures at this 500-year-old institute where many famous mathematicians have lectured, such as Jacob Bernoulli or Leonhard Euler. From an early age on, I was really fascinated with numbers. And during high school, I fell in love with geometry. In 11th grade, we had a subject called descriptive geometry, where we constructed the intersection lines between two cylinders. I thought that this was very cool, and I've been sticking to geometry ever since. Fortunately, over the last 45 years since then, I have been associated with many challenging design projects that involve nifty geometry problems. At Bell Labs, we built the first all-state all solid-state television camera based on charge-coupled devices. Then when I came to Berkeley, together with David Patterson and our students, we constructed the first reduced instruction set microcomputer chip. Later, when we needed a new home for computer science, I stepped up from 2D geometry to 3D geometry, but mostly it was still just floor plans and elevations for Soda Hall. But I got truly involved with true three-dimensional freeform geometry after I teamed up with Paul Wright in mechanical engineering, and as part of the project Cybercut, I helped develop optimal tool paths for milling machines for organically shaped surfaces. During the last 2 decades, I have worked with artists and mathematicians and mostly focused on additive manufacturing, such as 3D printing. The results are mathematical visualization models, such as the 3D Hilbert cube, which is composed out of 512 elbows, or the special double Klein bottle shown at the top right. I also designed a few sculptures on a larger scale, as shown at the bottom, and this is the result of a collaboration with Brent Collins. Brent is a wood sculptor. He lives in Gower, Missouri, about half an hour north of Kansas City, way out in the boondocks. And here we can see him holding our first truly collaborative piece called Hyperbolic Hexagon 2. This collaboration was inspired by this particular piece, which Brent had carved a couple of years earlier and called Hyperbolic Hexagon. Even though Brent is not a mathematician and conceived the shape almost intuitively, it is rather close to a minimal surface, which could be assumed by a soap film suspended in a suitable wireframe. The chain of 6 tunnels that surround the central hole can also be related to a classical minimal surface, namely the second minimal surface discovered by Shirk in 1834. The central portion of this surface is a stack of alternating tunnels and saddles crisscrossing each other's, and beyond that, the surface just stretches off to infinity in all directions. So it's only this central part that is artistically interesting, and I call this portion a Shirk tower. In the simplest case, the Shirk tower is just composed out of simple biped saddles as you find on the back of a horse. But the Shirk tower can be generalized to saddles of higher order. For instance, 3 third-order monkey saddles, which have 3 valleys going down, one of them to accommodate the monkey's tail, and then 3 ridges coming up in between. Now we can take such a Shirk tower and bend it into a toroidal loop. If you close a 4-story Shirk tower into the loop without any kind of twisting, you get the result shown at the top right. And if you do this for a 6-story tower, then you would get indeed Brent Collins' hyperbolic hexagon. But we can also give that tower some longitudinal twist of 180 degrees, as shown on the left, and then close it into a toroidal loop. In this case, we get something that is less symmetrical, but I think perhaps more dynamic and maybe more interesting. So you can readily guess that there is an infinite possibility of choosing number of stories, the branching of the saddles, and the amount of twist that we might apply. The question is, which one of these combinations makes some decent sculpture? To explore these possibilities, I wrote a very special purpose computer program. The only thing that it can model is such a chain of saddles and tunnels. Here you can see its user interface. About 10 sliders define the geometry of this chip. The order and number of saddles, their height, the width and thickness of the flanges, the treatment of the edges, whether they're squarely cut off or rounded, and most importantly, the amount of twisting and bending that you apply to the whole structure. For instance, you can bend the Shirk tower into a full circle or just into an arch, as shown here. Here is a whole bunch of shapes that readily pop out of the sculpture generator as you move those sliders around. And then add some fancy colors and textures. So with this generator, I could quickly generate a whole lot of promising artistic geometries some of which Brent liked enough so that he was willing to spend about 2 months of his life carving them out at the 30-inch scale. To make this easier for Brent, I let the computer calculate slices through the intended sculpture, 1 inch apart, and then I sent these 3-foot by 3-foot blueprints to Brent. He then used a saber saw to cut out these shapes out of a 1-inch thick mahogany boards. And then he stacked them all on top of one another, glued them together with industrial strength wood glue. And so he obtained the proper overall shape that contains all the right symmetries. However, as a start, the surface is rather staircased and uneven. So he spends a few weeks of grinding down and smoothing out the surface, and gradually a smooth surface starts to appear. You can also see a continuous broad rim emerge here, about 1 inch wide, and this rim travels around the whole loop 8 times in a twisted way before it gets back to the starting point. Brent then continues to grind down the wood volume of this object until he gets a really thin surface with a narrow, well-defined edge. And this is what the result looks like. We call this sculpture the heptoroid because it had 7 4th-order saddles in a twisted toroidal loop. It was exhibited at the art gallery at the Fermi lab near Chicago, and the physicists there, they really liked it a lot. Some thought that's maybe the structure of a quark, others thought it's like the magnetic distribution in a fusion machine or whatever. However, artists dream of seeing their sculptures at a much larger scale than 30 inches. Well, in 2003, we had an opportunity of building such a sculpture 12 feet tall. However, it was carved out of snow. This was done at the annual snow sculpting competition in Breckenridge, Colorado. It took 5 people 5 solid days to create this sculpture, but it held up less than 1 hour beyond jurying time. Still, the jury stuck to their decision reached 45 minutes earlier, and they awarded the silver medal to the World Wide Web. Nevertheless, you may understand why I now prefer to work with more durable materials. So here is another shape that also came out of my sculpture generator. In this case, I made a small 6-inch model on the fused deposition modeling machine, and then I sent this to Dingley Stone Carving Art Corporation, that's the name, in Southeast China. I told them to scale it up by a factor of 8 and to carve it out of solid granite. A few weeks later, I got this picture showing work in progress. Interestingly enough, they did not use any CAD file. They just used the model and calipers and then scaled it up by 8. By the way, this is the same place that also carved the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C., and they also started with just a small model of it. A few months later, this is what they shipped to us in a crate. And a few hours later, here is the finished installation. Paul Sushu, the guy standing in the middle, is the one who sponsored this project. He's a former student of Professor David Hodges. Everybody's very happy here that we could assemble the sculpture without scratching the beautiful polished surface. And you should really go and check it out on the 6th floor of Sutarjadai Hall, of the terrace to Davis Hall. The craftsmanship of this work is truly extraordinary. It looks almost like a metal cast. And I'm sure it took many, many hours of sanding and polishing. I just hope it wasn't little Chinese children that had to sand away all night. Anyhow, designing is the main activity of engineers. I have now designed and built things for about 60 years, mostly geometrical stuff, integrated circuits, chips, buildings, sculptures, or toys. Occasionally, I pause and look over my own shoulder and ask myself, how does a design come to be? In this respect, we had a very influential seminar. In 1989, Alice Agostino organized this inspiring interdisciplinary seminar on design theory and methodology, where we tried to distill out how the different disciplines understand and teach the design process. We found, for example, that in EECS, we distinguish between top-down and bottom-up design phases. But on any real task, one will typically alternate between these two modes and end up with sort of a meet-in-the-middle approach, or sometimes also called yo-yo design. In contrast, in architecture, they turn this diagram through 90 degrees, and they distinguish between form follows function and function follows form. And these two purist approaches are then mitigated by the constraints imposed by the surrounding environment, by the budget, and by code requirements. Overall, design is an iterative process which has been depicted in 100 different ways, many of which you can see on the web, and several of which you have heard described in our BiD seminars. But in the end, the basic concept is pretty much the same for all of these diagrams. You take your best guess, you build it or simulate it, you evaluate it, you make improvements, and you go around the cycle again. So the structure of the design process is not much of a mystery. It's mostly constraint optimization. The true mystery or miracle is creativity. Where do novel ideas come from? How can we introduce a paradigm shift that cannot be found by just small optimization steps? How do you learn to think outside the box? In this domain, there's much less of a consensus. As a wild example, here is the model proposed by Nobel Prize winner Bill Shockley. You find this diagram of creativity on the inside cover of his textbook on mechanics. You do not have time to study this now. I just want to make the point that ideas about where creativity comes from are much more divergent, and recommendations as to what is needed to enhance it differ widely. Personally, I have one strong belief, and that is that creativity is strongly linked to a playful state of mind. You do not invent new combat moves in a crisis situation when you get attacked. But when you're relaxed, with extra time on your disposal, then your brain can make novel connections. Therefore, I like to play with things and to build toys and fun stuff. At the end of a graduate course in creative geometric modeling in 1985, we put on an art exhibit. And in 1998, I helped launch the annual Art and Mathematics conference called Bridges. Bridges is now in its 18th year, and it has evolved into the largest and best established math art conference. Its main mission is to make mathematics more attractive and less scary to the general public. Last year, the conference was held in Seoul, Korea, in the newly opened Gwacheon National Science Museum. This is an absolutely fabulous place. My main talk I gave there was on Lego knots. This was a project where I built a set of modular tubular parts that matched the Lego Duplo building blocks in its cross-section. But these curved parts now allow the construction of various models of mathematical knots and links, as well as the creation of more free-form constructivist sculpture models. Here is a close-up on the first few parts that I built on a fused deposition modeling machine. They were just enough to emulate the two sculptures on the right by Henk van Putten, which is the kind of sculptures that were shown at the Bridges 2013 and which inspired this whole project. And since the parts are hollow, I can also thread Christmas lights into them and make them glow. And this is particularly relevant with the holiday seasons just approaching. Since then, I've been hooked on modularity. And I wondered, can modularity also be applied to more free-form shapes? Can we, for instance, start with a Klein bottle as some kind of a module, and then form connected sums of Klein bottles, resulting in single-sided surfaces of higher genus? On the right is a glass structure called by Cliff Stoll, and he's a local here, and he sells Klein bottles of all kinds. However, the double Klein bottle by Cliff Stoll is not actually a single-sided surface. If you analyze it, it's a double-sided torus of genus 1 with self-intersections. Here are two ways of making a true single-sided surface of genus 4 that corresponds to the connected sum of two Klein bottles. On the left is a rather integral solution, but it would be difficult to assemble this from snap-together parts. On the bottom right, you see two identical tubular parts that incorporate the characteristic mouth that you find in the classical Klein bottle. If you join those two parts together, as shown on top, then you get the desired non-orientable surface of genus 4. If instead you connect them as shown at the bottom right, then you obtain again a two-hole torus of genus 2.
Can you try to wrap this forward? Okay.
To push the modularity concept even further, I designed a few tubular junction parts with 3 arms that emerge with right angles between them. In all 4 cases shown, 2 of the arms exposed show one side of the surface, while the 3rd arm exposes the opposite side. These components can readily be placed at the corner of a cube, and 8 of those components together make a complete cube frame. The 8 corner pieces can be arranged in a few hundred different ways. In most cases, the surface that results will be single-sided, non-orientable, and will have a genus of 10. In a few special cases, the parts can be arranged so that the two-sidedness of the surface is maintained, and we then get the torus of genus 5. Here I use the same corner components, but with the addition of 6 curved connector pieces bending through 30 degrees. So I can now form the edge frame of a 3-sided prism. This will form a single-sided surface of genus 8 in most cases, but again, we can arrange it in a special case, so it's just a 4-hole torus of genus 4. And at this point, I really would like to acknowledge the help of Chris Myers in the Invention Lab for his help in building all the necessary parts on the Stratasys Viewprint machine. And to close, here is a slide from a talk that I gave at the BiD opening a little bit more than a decade ago. My talk had the pompous title, Design, Technology, and the Human Experience. I looked at the role of the computer in the creative process and in aesthetic optimization, which then led to a discussion how BiD might help to bridge the gap between art and engineering. I think that all of you who have participated in BiD over the last few years can attest to the fact that there's no longer a gap between these two disciplines. They have been fused together quite intimately. Thank you for your patience.
Awesome. Hi, Manish. Are you good to go?
I think so. So let me just is this showing up?
Yep.
Okay. And
In a second, we should be able to. I have to plug in the speaker cable. Just trying to get the display up again. Okay, so we have the display. I just need to mirror the display.
so is it ready to go?
Not quite.
Not quite.
Almost there.
Almost there. Okay.
How was that? Okay.
Okay.
Mute your mic. That'll help.
Yes.
Yes.
Which you might be able to do for.
But then you can't hear me.
Well, you have to mute the mic, the input, not the output.
Okay. Yeah. That's I think we're good. Manish, are you good to go?
I'm ready to go, yeah.
Awesome. Is that good? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Manish Agrawala, and I am really bummed out that I can't be at Berkeley for the BiD reunion. So I apologize to all of you for not being there. I would really have loved to have attended this reunion, and I'm bummed out that I'm missing seeing all of you. Before I start, I wanted to present some of the threads of research that we worked on that are most related to the kind of goals of the Berkeley Institute of Design. And the work that I'll show you today was really done in collaboration with a number of people. And you see their names listed at the bottom of this slide. These are current members of my group and former members of my group. And the work that I'll present in particular was really a collaboration with many of these people. And hopefully you recognize some of them here. So I really work in three main areas: visualization, computer graphics, and human-computer interaction. And a lot of the work that we do is about trying to make visual content. Although these days we've also included audio content in that quite a bit. And if you look at this Venn diagram, I think at the center of this diagram is the notion. Design runs very heavily through the work that we do, and fundamentally what I'm interested in is identifying and understanding design principles for creating effective audiovisual media. And that's kind of an abstract statement, so I think we should start by unpacking it a bit. So first, what do I mean by media? Really, we mean all kinds of media. We take a very wide view of what media is. It includes photographs, it includes graphs and charts, films, animation, audio, and even fabricated objects. All of these, I think, are different kinds of media, and design goes into creating all of these kinds of media. And then the other part of this kind of goal is design principles. And really, when I talk about design principles, what I mean here is techniques for emphasizing information important to a task, or for adjusting the media to facilitate some task. And so a lot of this work is really task-driven. We're designing content to aid in some particular task. And we've applied this kind of approach of identifying and understanding the underlying design principles in a number of domains. And the three that I'm currently working on are audiovisual storytelling tools, deconstructing charts and graphs, and finally fabricating functional objects. And I don't have enough time today to talk about all three of these. What I'm going to do is focus on the first two. So let's start with audiovisual storytelling tools. And you've probably seen, many of you have probably seen in the past some of the work we've done on editing audio and video through a transcript-based representation. And I want to start by talking about the other end of that. Once you have a video presentation, how do you provide tools for viewing it so that people can easily navigate to specific portions of it? So consider this online lecture. It's from Brett Victor, and it's kind of captured as this video of him presenting the work. And this is a nice way to be able to view the content asynchronously. But if I want to go to a specific part of this, it's really hard to get there. I simply have to scrub on the underlying timeline slider to find the portion of it that I'm most interested in. But these kinds of videos have a lot more structure. So, you know, people think of interview videos or lecture videos in terms of the underlying content, the speech that's being spoken. And that consists of words, sentences, and paragraphs. And this is the structure, this is the way that we think of the content of these kinds of videos. And so the goal of this work is to let users navigate video using this transcript-based representation. And I think this is a very powerful representation for videos that include a lot of speech. So, in fact, we were also inspired by Brett Victor's own work. He took his video and broke it up into what we call a video digest. It consists of this chapter structure, much like a textbook, and then each one of the chapters is broken up into sections, and there's a short text summary with each section. And these chapters and sections allow people to really easily navigate to the specific portions of the video that they might be most interested in. This is a much, much better structure for navigation. So, so he built this thing, but in speaking with him, he told us that it took him a really long time to break up the video into the chapter section structure, to write the summaries, and so on. He didn't really have any tools for doing this, and he ended up, scrubbing back and forth through the video lots and lots of times to find exactly where he should cut it up into segments. So, and I should just point out that you can play each one of the individual sections and see the video from that point. So we built the tool a couple of years ago. This is work with BiD, and we built this tool to make it a lot easier to create this kind of video digest format. And the idea here is that you take an input video and you also obtain a transcript of that video. The transcript you see on the right side in the screen. And that transcript is time aligned with the video. So here I'll show you the alignment. And once you have this time-aligned transcript, it's much easier to navigate to specific parts of the video, to decide how to break it up into chapters and sections, and also to create the summaries. So what we built on top of this was an interface to do that. And so here we can scroll through the transcript, figure out topically coherent chapters, and just drop in these chapter markers. And when we drop them in, the system segments the video into these individual pieces. And you can see that happening here. And then similarly, once we add in all of the chapters, we can further break up the video into sections. And so here I'm adding the section markers for each one of the pieces. And you can build them up that way. And then as we, and then after we've added in all of the sections, we can start to add in text summaries. So here I've clicked on one of the sections. It highlights the portion of the text. And I can start to write in a text summary that summarizes what's going on. Video. And so this kind of interface makes it a lot easier to create this digest format. And once you have the digest format, it's a lot easier for viewers to navigate the video. And here's the results. So you can see that we're able to produce something that looks very similar to Brett Victor's digest format. So, and again, this allows you to just play the portions of the video that you want to play. Now, we've taken this idea further. This is again in Carl's work. And hopefully some of the audience there have other questions. I'm sure she can demos this week afterwards. This is an interface that she built for browsing large collections of video. So Video Digest is really about navigating and browsing a single video. This is a tool for taking large collections of films and allowing you to navigate them. And as you can see in this screenshot, we have a kind of search interface that allows you to search, do a regular keyword search, and then we bring up results from the films wherever those keywords appear, and then on the right side we have a summary pane, a script pane, and a movie pane with captions below. And the main idea of this work is that these three forms of documents that are related to the film are all time-allowed. And this allows you to navigate by any of the three of them. So I'm going to play this video that describes it in more detail.
When I click on it, in the script, let's just browse by action, visual description, on the page. So by clicking on the location pattern, I can adjust the external pattern. And notice that when I click on this location, the summary and the content will pull into the first one. The content runs down from the content side. So to hear the word identification, I can just click on it. In addition to browsing each one of the documents individually, you can include it for all of the documents across multiple files. So for example, if I don't remember what the or file name, I can just type this one into the search bar and use the location. And here I can see multiple settings that are within Files. So here's the file card, a landing platform, looking pointers, and the filter. I can also search for actions that I currently do. So RPD doesn't have these speaking lines, but the script mentions multiple times each, and the script is constantly. So I can type in each. I'll scroll down the entire site. And I think just quickly the search results on here.
So that's the system, and it's really designed to help film scholars or people at movie studios to quickly find portions of film that they've maybe seen in the past or study in more detail through these parallel documents. We've also been interested in analyzing podcasts. And so one of the things that we've been doing is getting transcripts of a large collection of podcasts. Here is the collection for This American Life, but you can imagine getting transcripts for thousands of podcasts that are available now. There's a startup called Archive that we're working that has transcripts. And what we're doing is starting to analyze the transcripts. So this chart is showing the frequency with which people say the word no on This American Life compared to the frequency with which they say the word yes in the transcripts. And an interesting thing here is why no is said so much more often than yes. And by seeing the data in this way, you start to get, you can start to build hypotheses. Maybe they're saying no a lot more because This American Life is a very negative show. Maybe they're saying, maybe yes is said much less than other positive terms like yeah or or things like that. So, so it's a way to kind of analyze the speech patterns. So that's what we've been doing on the audiovisual storytelling side. I also wanted to show some of the recent work that we've been doing on BiD strategy charts and graphs. And so here, this work is really predicated on this idea that we see poorly designed charts all over the place. Here's a pie chart that is not particularly well designed, and one of the problems with it is that you can't really tell the difference in size between the slices for hepatitis C and hepatitis B, or Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. The slices are very, very similar in size. And that's one of the problems with pie charts in general. But these kinds of poorly designed charts are all over the place. My favorite being this one from Fox News. What we would like to do is make it a lot easier to redesign these charts and eliminate some of the problems with them. So we've built a tool that will take an image of a chart like this and analyze the bitmap, the pixels. This is a challenging task because, from analyzing the pixels, it's hard to retrieve the underlying data, and it's hard to redesign a pie chart that we have. So we've built a tool that will do this kind of analysis using image processing and computer vision techniques to recover a data table, the data that's represented in this chart. And then once we have the data table, we can start to redesign the chart. So here's the same pie chart, but in bar chart form. And in this form, it's much, much easier to tell the differences in sizes between the different diseases. And here's yet another example of this. In this case, we have a bar chart, not very well designed, and we can recover the data, redesign it, with some chart for choices and so on, and build the relationship. Now, I should point out that in this work, we manually did the redesigns, and so I think it's still future work to automate. The other thing we can do is once we have the underlying data for a chart, we can start to bring the chart to life. We can make it easier to read the chart. And so we did some work a few years ago where we recovered the data, and then as you interactively hover on parts of the chart, it will highlight a bar, or we can add these extra grid lines that make it easier to read off values on the chart, or we can directly label the different bars with their values so that people can better understand what's going on. And that kind of leads to a current direction of work. We want to make it easier to read documents that contain visualizations. So visualizations are almost always embedded in text documents, and those documents describe different parts of the visualization. So here's an article on the right from The Guardian, and you can see that there's a bar chart in it, and there's also these sentences in the text that describe parts of the chart. And what we'd like to be able to do is click on one of the sentences and highlight the bar that relates to it, or vice versa. Click on the bar and highlight the sentences. And we took a step in this direction a few years ago by crowdsourcing the references between the text and the charts. So here's a chart from a Pew Research report, and on the right is a bit of text that relates to it. And we asked crowd workers to mark the references between the text and the charts, and that allowed us to build a kind of interactive document. But really doing this well is challenging. So in this example from The Economist, again, we have a bar chart on the left and a bit of text on the right. But the text is describing parts of the chart using words that don't really appear in the chart. So here, they're talking about the Anglo-Saxon world, and the reader is expected to be able to translate that into the countries Australia, Canada, US, and Britain. And so one of the challenges in building these kinds of references is to do this kind of translation. And one of the things that we learned in our previous work is that doing this automatically is very or doing it by crowdsourcing, because people don't always have the same background in interpretation. So we've been also applying this approach of deconstruction to large collections of documents. We're scraping the whole collection of Pew Research reports, scientific articles, and deconstructing the visualizations to recover the data. And that's where I wanted to lead that project. If you want to learn more about these projects, my website, our website for the group is at biz.berkeley.edu. Check them out. Students that work on these projects are likely in the audience. Amy Carell worked on the BiD media stuff. Nick Kahn worked on the visualization work. Please talk with them. If, feel free to reach me. And finally, I just wanted to say that hopefully at the center of all of this work, as you've seen, is this notion of design. And what we've really been focused on in this work is to better understand what makes good design and then build tools that help people create good design. And I think being part of BiD has really helped us understand design from a number of different perspectives. So thank you all, and I'm sorry again that I couldn't be there today for the meeting, but I hope to see you all soon.
Thanks so much. I don't know, does anyone have a question? All right, thanks. Thanks, Manish. You're off.
Okay.
So actually, Sarah Beckman was on the schedule this morning, but she actually had a speaker cancel for her seminar, so she can't make it today. So we'll go straight into the break and then pick up with Marty after the coffee break.
Yeah.